If we do not take a stand, we get the government we deserve. I used to be happy with America because I grew up in my elementary school days and then in high school. My civics lesson said we have representative government. And I assumed we did. And now I realize we do not. Because the minority, not the majority, vote. The majority choose not to have a representative. And they choose to be able to say, well, I didn't vote for him or her. My fellow Americans, we have a problem. And it's us. It's us. Why should you care about politics? Why should you care? The democracy that I love and its preservation for my grandchildren depends on us. There are those out there, cynics perhaps, and I hope they're only cynics and not right, who say that the privilege of Americans to vote will be gone before this century is over. That only those who are members of the party will be able to vote in selecting leadership. Does that sound like some countries you know? Democracy depends on our participation. Not the few, but the majority. Why else should you care about politics? History tells us that a government will become corrupt if its citizens are not vigilant. The colonies set that course for us. The price to establish freedom, when once it's been taken away, is high. I would rather us preserve our freedom with votes than guns and bullets. But the Founding Fathers realized the potential. And though most people are not comfortable with this thought, it is true that the intention of the right to bear arms was so that the people would be armed against their government if needed. Local militias to rise up and say the government has trampled my rights as a citizen. I don't ever want to go there. I hope we use our ballot box to go there. But sadly, many people don't vote. Less than 30% of the eligible voters in California went to the polls on Tuesday. In my district, a congressman is likely to be reelected with 33,000 votes, representing 600,000 citizens, or residents, not all citizens. Are those numbers just sick? They are to me. My wife looked at the total turnout, voting for Republicans and Democrats and independents, and said there are fewer people that voted in this district than live in San Leandro. And the district represents the city of Alameda, San Leandro, Hayward, San Lorenzo, Union City, Fremont, Newark. And less than half the people who live in San Leandro went to the polls to vote for anybody. Why should you care? Because if you believe in the freedoms of America, you need to preserve them. And you do that first and foremost at the ballot box. So I took a bigger step. Rather than just voting this year, I found myself complaining back in December. I was watching legislative goo going on in D.C. and I was getting disgusted. And my dad always taught me, don't complain, do. Don't complain, do. Well, what could I do? I did the unthinkable. I filed paperwork. I dropped a couple of $1,000 and got my name put on the ballot. And then I went out and I spent Saturdays and free time trying to convince people it's time for a stark change. I set up a website. I started blogging every day. I invite you to go out to the blog. I'll keep it going because it's actually been very therapeutic for me to get out there and blog and put my thoughts out where the rest of the world can see it. But I sat there and said, you know, I don't want to get involved. These people are toxic. I got a great good boss. I've got something I'm doing for a living that I really love. And if I get elected, and I've said this in several public forums, if I get elected, I fully appreciate the Democratic Party will not be happy with me for taking on an incumbent. They will give me the worst assignments they possibly can in DC to punish me. And 2 years from now, they'll come after me with every gun they've got to take me down. Now, what would motivate anyone to want to step into that arena? The gladiators had it good compared to that. And yet, someone has to do something, or nothing gets done. Don't complain, do. Frankly, I think most people don't get involved because they're too lazy. We prefer to be entertained than to be put at risk. We prefer to watch TV or watch ball games or do something than to have people pry into our personal private lives, which every candidate at this point has to succumb to. It's a risk. So why take the risk? Personally, I think that if we don't, we will bury our children in debt. This is the first generation that, in my opinion, instead of saying, let me sacrifice for the good of my children, has said, let my children sacrifice for my comfort and ease. My parents and my grandparents came through generations that suffered through the Great Depression and hardship, putting things aside so that they could fight to preserve freedom, so that they could set money aside to live frugally so they could send their children to college. My generation is saying, let's bury the nation in debt so that we don't have to suffer any hardship and our children can pay the bill. Frankly, I think we all need some psychotherapy because that's not the way it should be. It's not the way it should be. And yet, we send people back to DC who bring home the bacon. What bacon? The unpaid for, borrowed bacon. They bring home our grandchildren's bacon and say, here, re-elect me, I brought home bacon. And we fall for it. I'm a cynic, perhaps, but Monday, the day before the election, Pete and others were down in Fremont announcing $19 million of new federal training so that it would make the front page of the Tuesday paper so that it would encourage people to come vote and re-elect them with your tax dollars. Think about it. What do you do to get your voice heard? Well, as I said, I opened up a website, I took out a blog, I printed flyers, and I made use of something that you've all helped me build. This wonderful skill of standing fearlessly in front of an audience, even a hostile audience, and saying what I believe. Declaring with clarity what I believe. I sat down after speaking at the Alameda County Democratic Lawyers Association endorsement luncheon to somebody who went, I don't have the guts to say that, but that was well said. Use this voice of yours. If you think it's weak, come here and get trained. Pick up the skills we give you. Table topics is an absolute blessing when you're on the campaign trail. You get asked all sorts of oddball things. And some of them you learn to just let go by. Because people are trying to bait you into a trap. But some of them, you figure out how to connect and comment on what you believe in. My fellow Toastmasters, my fellow Americans, get involved. I hung this flag outside my house for a while. It's a historical flag. And it's upside down.
That's just backwards.